All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a topic that I think affects pretty much all of us in some way, shape, or form: educational technology.
Absolutely.
We've got this really interesting research here. It's a pretty massive review. Looks at how different digital tools affect how much people actually learn. Think back to like any online courses you might have taken, or even those apps your kids use.
Right.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, and for you, the learner, we really want to get straight to the good stuff. Give you a clear understanding, kind of no nonsense about when and why technology can actually be a game changer in education, without getting bogged down in the super technical stuff. It's like a shortcut to understanding what the science really says. This review pulled from a lot of studies. We did all the reading, so you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not about one specific gadget or even one specific subject. The review looked at a huge range, all sorts of technologies, different subjects, and learners from elementary school all the way through PhD programs. And here's the big reveal right off the bat. Technology in education, it's not inherently good or bad. Whether it helps you learn really depends on how it's used and if it fits with how our brains actually learn.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Well, I think what's fascinating to start with is this baseline that the research has really uncovered. We see consistently that when technology is just used to present information, like reading on a screen versus a book or watching a recording of a lecture versus being in the room, there's generally no real difference in how much people learn.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising. So much buzz about how, changing up the format and all that, but it seems like the format itself doesn't really change that initial delivery of information. So like going all the way back to 1954, Anderson and Vandermeer looked at high schoolers learning how to use slide rules. And they found no difference in their math learning, whether the instruction was face-to-face or on television, as long as they had the same material and the same instructor.
Yeah, that pattern just pops up again and again across different technologies, different times. I mean, Hollerback and Mims in 2007 found that whether students learn about radio concepts in a live lecture or through a video lecture did make a significant difference in how well they understood. Francescucci and Rohani in 2019, and even Francescucci and Foster, just a few years before that, they studied marketing courses. And what they found was there's no real difference in final exam scores between traditional in-person classes and online classes that happened in real time. Same instructor, same content, same opportunities to interact.
Yeah, it is a bit surprising. You might just assume that, oh, you go online, it's automatically better or worse.
Right.
But it seems like it's more nuanced than that. Johnson and colleagues back in 2000, and Steinweg and others in 2005, found pretty much the same thing. They compared face-to-face and online courses that had, pretty much identical content. Steinweg's study even suggested a tiny advantage for online learning, but it wasn't statistically significant. So, nothing to write home about there.
Right, right.
So it's not a simple swap, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a core insight here for you, the learner.
Yeah.
Don't just assume that something's delivered through technology. It's going to automatically lead to better learning. Just swapping a traditional method for a digital one without really thinking about how that changes the learning process often doesn't make a noticeable difference.
Okay, so if just presenting information in a new way doesn't really move the needle, when does technology actually become a powerful tool for learning? I mean, that's the real question here. This is where it gets interesting. The research points to the power of what are called affordances. Think of it as like what technology lets you do that you couldn't easily do otherwise, and how well those capabilities line up with effective learning principles.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I think the review highlights really three key learning principles that technology can significantly enhance. And the first is repetition, engaging with the material more frequently. Second is spaced repetition, which is spreading out that engagement over time. And third, and this is a big one, is retrieval practice. That's the act of actively pulling information out of your memory.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with repetition, right? How technology can kind of boost that. It seems like some digital tools, they just naturally encourage students to interact with the material more frequently.
Absolutely. And we see this, in the research. I mean, Johnson and colleagues back in 2002 found that students taking an online consumer economics course reported spending more time on the course overall. Schoenfeld, Thatcher, and others in 2001, they observed more lively discussions, more high-level questions in online histology courses compared to the face-to-face equivalents.
Yeah, so sometimes it's just about like creating an environment where it's easier to jump in and interact.
Right, exactly.
Right. And then, of course, you have mobile devices, smartphones, and tablets. The review mentioned several studies by Shadiev and colleagues, Siciliano and others, and Turan and co., showing that, just having the course materials on your phone or tablet leads to people interacting with it more.
Exactly. And it's not just about the total time spent. Some technologies, they can actually make learning more efficient within the actual teaching time. So Chang and colleagues, for example, they looked at using tablet PCs, and they found that they could save time on certain tasks, which then allowed for more actual practice during the lesson. Ahmadzahi and Gudarzi, they found similar time-saving benefits with mobile assessment tools. So the underlying idea is that technology can create more opportunities for you to engage with the material, and that increased engagement generally leads to better learning.
Right. So it's almost like it streamlines things so you have more time to practice.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So let's move on to retrieval practice. This sounds like a really powerful way that technology can make a real difference.
It is the act of trying to recall information from your memory.
Yeah.
It's a really fundamental way to strengthen learning, and many technologies can be designed to weave in these opportunities for you to actively recall what you've learned.
Give me some concrete examples.
So, that same histology course by Schoenfeld Techer that we talked about, it also included practice quizzes after the online lectures, which, that's a direct way to encourage retrieval. Chang's computerized earth science lessons back in 2000 had these questions popping up after video segments, prompting the students to remember what they just watched. Fargo, Lira, and Heiss, they use computerized food safety tutorials with quizzes and case studies, to get students to recall and apply their knowledge. Jeffrey's work on computerized medication administration included quizzes and feedback. Liu and colleagues used computerized statistics in a way that specifically highlighted and corrected common misunderstandings through recall. McLaughlin and Roney used online activities before their neurology classes to kind of get students thinking about the material in advance. Spichtig and others, they developed computerized reading exercises with comprehension questions and feedback built in.
Wow. So there's a lot of different ways this can be applied. It's almost like these low stakes quizzes and checks are really good for reinforcing what you've learned.
Absolutely, and it's not just standalone quizzes either. Ibadi and Gucci, they found that when they added online vocabulary quizzes to traditional instruction, learning actually improved. Zubas and colleagues saw similar benefits when they were using web-based practice quizzes and case studies in a nutrition course. And the whole idea behind flipped classrooms, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, often involves frequent quizzes as a key part of the in-class activities. We saw this in studies by Anderson and colleagues, Go and Ong and Lin. Even educational games can be designed to include knowledge checks and practice, like in research by Dorji and Wu. So the recurring theme is that actively recalling information reinforces it in your memory.
Yeah, makes it stick. Okay, so lots of ways technology can build in that crucial element of recall. What about spaced repetition? How can technology help me kind of spread out my learning over time?
Well, a lot of times the same technologies that are good for retrieval practice also work really well for spaced repetition. Think about that reading program Spichtig and colleagues studied. It was used consistently throughout the entire school year. So that regular exposure, the opportunities to recall information over a longer period, that's the hallmark of spaced repetition. Similarly, simulations, as Cao and colleagues and Liu and Su found, they can allow you to practice skills repeatedly over weeks, reinforces learning more effectively than just cramming it all in at once.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we all know that cramming doesn't really work in the long run. Okay, so the real power of technology, it sounds like, is not just about, being flashy or just showing me information, but it's about creating these repeated opportunities for me to engage, to actively pull that information out of my brain and to revisit it over time.
Right.
But the review also points out situations where technology doesn't help or can even make learning worse.
Mm.
So what's going on there?
That's a really important point. The review found that technology can, fall short or even be harmful for a few main reasons. These often have to do with um, decreased engagement, lack of interaction with an instructor, or simply students not using the technology in the way it was intended.
So can you give me some examples of when things didn't go so well?
Sure. So Del Fuente and colleagues in 1998, they looked at students learning pharmacy calculations. And they found that because the computer-based problems offered so much flexibility, some students ended up spending less overall time practicing them, or they waited till just before exams to do the work. So that flexibility actually, it kind of undermined the potential benefits of the practice.
Right. So almost too much freedom.
Exactly. Vicevich Paisal and others found that using computerized instruction for arterial blood gas analysis took students longer than using a textbook.
Yeah.
And this meant they actually completed fewer assignments. They just ran out of time.
Yeah. So it's almost like, in those cases, the technology itself, it wasn't the problem, but it changed how students approach the learning in ways that weren't helpful.
Exactly. And sometimes, traditional face-to-face instruction, it offers advantages that aren't easily replicated online.
Yeah.
Harrington's 1999 study on statistics found that in-class discussions about homework, they were really helpful for students in the face-to-face classes.
Yeah.
But those discussions were missing in the computerized version.
Right.
So that direct interaction, the chance to get immediate clarification, can be crucial for understanding.
Yeah, there's something to be said for being able to get that quick feedback from someone in the room.
Right.
Right. And it sounds like, not having an instructor readily available can be a real drawback in some of these, tech-heavy learning environments.
It can be, yeah. Several studies, including ones by Arus and colleagues, McDonough and Marks, Pei and Co., they found that when students were using computerized instruction in labs but didn't have access to an instructor, their learning suffered. Without someone to answer their questions and guide them, especially when they're struggling, the technology alone isn't enough. Mathievets and others found that a self-paced online anatomy lab led to students just putting off studying until just before the exams, which meant they missed out on the benefits of spreading out their learning over time. And sometimes, like De La Fuente and colleagues pointed out, conventional instruction, it simply provides more opportunities for engagement, or like Kunith and Creek's research suggests, better guidance from the instructor.
Right. So it's not just about having the cool gadget. It's about how that technology is integrated into the learning experience.
Right.
And whether it still supports those really important elements of engagement and guidance.
Right.
Okay, so the review also mentioned that combining traditional and computer-based instruction can be really effective, and it makes sense, right? It's almost like a good middle ground.
It is. The research increasingly suggests that this hybrid approach, blending conventional and digital methods, can be particularly powerful. The work of Kilikskaya, as well as Kuneth and Creek, supports this. It's about finding that right mix.
So instead of completely replacing traditional teaching, technology can be a really good supplement.
Absolutely. Verdugo and Belmonte found that using digital stories helped young students learn English better in the classroom. Liu and colleagues, they saw significant improvements in middle schoolers' English skills when they were creating their own digital stories as part of their learning. And we've seen lots of examples where, adding computerized activities like quizzes, practice problems, and simulations. This was studied by Ebadi and Gucci, Gonzalez and others, Zubas and Co., Sarah and colleagues, Bordizatu and others, and Bortnick and colleagues. And they all found positive results from this kind of supplementation. Mobile apps that offer extra practice and visual aids. We see that in the studies by Chang and Yu, Turan and others, and DeBeef and colleagues, even using tablet PCs for more interactive learning, as Chang and Co found. All of these kind of fit this model of beneficial supplementation.
Yeah, it makes sense. You get the best of both worlds. You get the structure and the personal interaction of traditional teaching, plus the added benefits and flexibility of technology.
Precisely.
Right. Okay, so the review also looks specifically at the impact of simulations and animations. What did the research show there?
Well, the findings on simulations were a bit mixed. They weren't consistently better or worse than real-world activities unless they offered some, clear advantage, like giving students more time to practice.
Mhm.
We saw that with Lu and Sue, Xiao and colleagues. But if they somehow reduced engagement, like in Methiobet's study,
Yeah.
then they weren't as effective. So it seems like the key is whether the simulation really captures the important learning aspects of the real activity,
Right.
while adding something extra.
Right. So it can't just be a pale imitation. It has to offer something more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. And what about animations? I mean, they can be really, really good for visualizing complex things.
Yeah, they can. The review does suggest a slight trend towards animations being more helpful than static images,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're trying to explain dynamic processes. We saw that in studies by McLean and colleagues, Daly and others, and Perry and Go. The thinking is that animations can make these complex steps or changes much clearer. But it's not a guaranteed win. Some studies showed no significant difference or even negative effects, possibly because too much movement or visual information can overload your brain. We see that in Cole and Mintzer's work. So even with tools that seem inherently helpful, like animations, careful design and implementation are crucial.
Right. You have to use them strategically.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So one approach that's been getting a lot of attention is the flipped classroom. The review also touched on this.
Right. The flipped classroom model, where students engage with learning materials like video lectures outside of class, and then class times is focused on more active learning and application. Generally showed positive results in the research we looked at. Anderson and colleagues, Lin, Blasquez and colleagues, Lucchetti and colleagues, going on, they all found benefits.
So what do you think? What do you think makes the flipped classroom so potentially effective?
Well, the success seems to come from a few key factors, which are often enabled by technology. By having students watch lectures or do readings beforehand, they can come to class with some initial understanding. But the really important part is that it frees up valuable in-class time for more active learning strategies, and crucially for retrieval practice through things like quizzes and discussions. So that shift towards actively applying and recalling information during class, that seems to be a big driver of the positive outcomes.
Right. Okay. So finally, the review also briefly mentioned some broader advantages of technology that go beyond just how much information I might remember on a test.
Right. Right. While we've mainly focused on objective learning outcomes, it's important to remember that the technology can, also make education more accessible to a wider range of students, and it can provide safer ways to practice certain skills like medical procedures or chemistry experiments through simulations. So these are significant benefits, even if they don't always directly result in higher grades.
Okay, so let's wrap things up for you, the learner. What are the most important takeaways from this deep dive into the research on educational technology?
Well, I think the first takeaway is to really remember that the technology itself isn't some magic bullet for better learning. Just because you're using a digital tool doesn't automatically mean you're going to learn more effectively.
Right. It's not about the bells and whistles.
Exactly. The second crucial point is to focus on how technology enables effective learning principles.
Yeah.
We've seen that the technologies that give you more chances for repetition help you space out your learning, and especially encourage you to actively recall information. Those are the ones that tend to lead to the most significant learning gains.
So as a learner, I should really be thinking about, okay, how's this technology actually changing the way I'm interacting with the material?
Exactly. Third, it's important to consider whether the technology you're using gives you, more opportunities to engage with the material without hindering other important things like interaction with your instructor or even leading to procrastination. So just having access isn't enough.
Yeah.
You need to use it effectively.
Right. It's about being mindful as a student about how you're using it. It's not just about, oh, I have access to these online resources, these interactive tools. It's about, okay, how am I actually using them in ways that support my learning?
And that raises a really important point for you to think about. Now that you have a deeper understanding of what the research shows, take a closer look at the educational technologies you encounter, whether in your own learning or in other contexts. Are they truly enhancing learning by taking advantage of these key principles, or are they just delivering information in a new format? What small adjustments could make them more effective by better aligning with how we actually learn? Ultimately, it's not just about the tools themselves. It's fundamentally about the process of learning.
Right. Okay. Well, that is a great place to leave it for today. Thank you so much for joining us
It's been my pleasure.
for the deep dive, and we'll see you next time.